So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar for the second year running, Predictions in Responsible Gambling for 2025. My name is Niamh Gallagher, I'm Marketing Manager here at Mindway AI. And new year, we have an engaging session ahead, exploring predictions in safer gambling for 2025 and beyond. So big thank you to all of you attendees for actively participating ahead of time and submitting your own predictions, which our panel have received and will be discussing today. So just some quick housekeeping before we get started. So the webinar is being recorded. We'll share the recording with you after the session. Any questions at any point, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. We'll also have some time at the end to facilitate questions. So without further delay, we'll get started. It's my pleasure to welcome our panel. And just to say, unfortunately, Sean from KTO couldn't be with us today. But for the rest of our panel, I'll let you briefly introduce yourselves and give a quick bit of background information. So Dan, you're on my top left-hand side, so I'll let you go first.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on the part of the world. My name is Dan Umfleet. I am the CEO and founder of the Converge Group. Converge has multiple entities underneath it that solve a variety of different problems. We have a behavioral health clinic, which works directly with individuals suffering from gambling-related harms and dealing with mental health issues, and a managed services organization, which works with major health systems, major operators, and other interested parties in technology integrations for healthcare solutions. And we have a 501c3 charity partner, which is the Cambridge Research Institute. So I'm based in Denver, Colorado. It's early for me, but not as early as some of the folks I've seen join in from Vegas. So there you go.
We're in Vegas. Dave, I'll let you go next. Oh, you're on mute, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Richardson. I'm the Head of Strategic Partnerships at Better Change. Better Change work with gambling industry stakeholders through consultancy and products with a focus on positive play. So very much about creating a sustainable industry.
Great, thanks, Dave. And Yardina, I'll let you go next.
Hi, I'm Yardena Mago. I had the player safety function at Evoke. I've been working in this industry for many years, and I've been doing product development for many years, and until I found my passion at safer gambling and decided to merge between the two. So this allows me to look at strategy and the new trends, but also implement a better user experience for our customers.
Great, thanks, Yardina. And Rasmus, I'll let you go next.
Thank you very much. I'm Rasmus Kjærgaard, and I'm the CEO of Mindway AI. I anticipate that most of you know us, but should there be one or a couple who do not know us at Mindway AI, we are a player protection solution provider, combining the use of AI and neuroscience, scientific based, for detection of at-risk and problem gambling. And I'm very happy to invite you that you have joined this webinar together with me and a selection of our great partners here.
Great, thanks, Rasmus. So just to go straight into it, we had a lot of responses for the webinar. So again, thank you everyone for submitting these. Regional developments and global trends came up as one of the biggest topics. And with Latin America, particularly Brazil, emerging as a potential leader in RG adoption and setting high standards for operators. Rasmus, I'll go to you on this. What predictions do you have for how the region might influence global RG practices?
Yeah, that's an interesting first question to start with, because obviously Brazil is and the Brazilian market opening January 1st this year is a hot topic for everyone in this industry working globally or regionally, I would guess. So seen from my perspective as a player protection solution provider CEO, an interesting thing in the Brazilian market opening was that actually the regulators announced the responsible gambling ordinance with an obligation to operators to have an AI-based detection and monitoring system in place from day one. it is fair to say that that has driven a slight level of extra interest in what we're doing from Brazil and people addressing the Brazilian market. But obviously that is an interesting thing, because even though we have seen this in other jurisdictions as well, it's a new thing that it is so much and very much outlined in a regulation in such a potential huge market. Some industry peers consider potentially the market opening of our lifetime. So that will be interesting to follow to how that will evolve, both related to the Brazilian market, but also elsewhere in terms of regulators inspiring each other to update and enhance regulation.
Okay, thanks, Rasmus. And then moving a bit more north, Dan, there's been an increased recognition in the US for the need for sustainable RG practices. Could be, someone mentioned that it's likely driven by political, public, and media scrutiny. So how do you foresee the shaping of RG policies and industry standards? Oh, Dan, you're on mute.
Thank you. 2025 is probably going to round out to be a pretty turbulent year. A lot of interesting change going on in the country. And I think there's a lot of momentum swinging in the direction of everybody getting behind some really good, well thought through sustainable solutions on the RG front and the problem gambling front. What we sort of see happening from where we sit is sort of an ever-changing landscape on a state-by-state basis, where states that are still considering sportsbook and are now considering iGaming are really bringing to the table some more strenuous and more consumer protection oriented ideas to the table for the bills. Where all those go, I don't know how they land, but what we are starting to see is a lot more dollars come to the space to help get the right sort of products in place. And there's a lot of buy-in that's starting to show up. This is my background. I came from the UK and I worked on these problems over in the UK for a while. And then I came over to the US right at the start of this, when everything started coming online in 2018. And what I'm seeing now is sort of like rapid adoption towards, I think, well thought through solutions. And then a lot of sort of think tank momentum going on around what to do next and how to keep doing it better and bigger, which is really great. And then just a lot of open minds to putting some better solutions in the space, which is great. And I think that's just going to continue.
And what do you think that operators can do to align with the evolving expectations, to have a sustainable business model in especially such a competitive market as in the US?
I think this is a multi-layered answer, right? So I think one of the things that we think about, right, is at its very core, right, providing sort of routing systems like Mindway that help identify and then start to push somebody into a pathway, right? And then providing services that instantly meet someone where they are for individuals that are struggling with mental health related issues, or just want to talk and get some more information around responsible gambling or problem gambling, is really sort of a core philosophy that needs to be adopted universally across the country, right? Up until really the last 2 years, the country really didn't have a whole lot of infrastructure built underneath it for services that gamblers would need in the event that their mental health is harmed. It's still early days. It's getting better, but it's not as big as it needs to be, and it's not as big as it's going to get. So I think using a routing system at a very minimal sort of level is the right thing for everybody to get behind, because ultimately it helps get everybody where they need to go. So I think sort of using that as your core base is a good place to start. There's a lot of other things that I think, working with a handful of the operators that I think are going to get more attention this year, which in particular is going to be around actually looking at what percentage of the players are utilizing the RG tools that are available on the platform in the first place, and driving more momentum towards getting more individuals to utilize the RG tools. How high that goes in percentage utilization, I don't know, but I do know there's going to be more emphasis put on that, and I think that that's a good thing. And then just raising a lot more awareness around all things related to responsible gambling, I think is another thing that you're going to see push through organizations like Roga moving forwards. And I think that's going to have an impact on the younger generation as well. So like those are sort of root things that I'd like to see continue to move in the right direction.
And so for new territories that are entering regulation, is there any kind of measures that you think should be implemented from the outset in addition to that?
I just think make sure your public health strategy and your population health strategy is really well thought through. Because RG is one thing, PG is another. They often get sort of crossed over, right? But like at the end of the day, human intervention is going to be required for a certain portion of the population. It's inevitable. You're not going to be able to save everybody or protect everybody or put everybody back on the right track. It's just not reality, right? So I think as much as we can do on the RG side is great, but I think don't forget about the PG side, and definitely make sure early on that there's some strong policies put in place around how the PG side of the equation is managed.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. So moving on to the next discussion area, and really no huge surprise here, it's AI and tech in RG. This was an area that a lot of people see for key developments happening. So Rasmus, how do you foresee the role of AI solutions evolving in RG, but particularly balancing player behavior monitoring with the need to ensure human oversight and then have that kind of empathetic interactions as well?
Yeah, so obviously AI is, I think everybody can agree to, a high-speed train that has started, and a lot of people perceive it as it hasn't slowed down yet, or will not slow down at all. The way I have seen it lately is that there might be some sort of balance related to a first hype, whereas I now see, let's say, indications that there is increasingly a discussion in more detail on what AI is, how it is built, and the consequences of how it is built. What we have found, and is based on, likely some of you have heard it before, but sorry if I'm repeating then, is that we think that due to the fact that at-risk and problem gambling is a quite sensitive individual human behavior, AI needs to have a human supervision or humans involved in working and building those models, not self-training models. Regarding to the sensitivity, train the models based on humans. We chose the approach to combine human psychologists, or lived experience people in our expert panel. We a specific expertise is also to build in ensure high efficacy of the models, because a too low efficacy gives too many false positives, meaning not players not showing signs of problems with a solution of a certain accuracy that is then actually bothered by the communication, even though it's positive from Dan's side, or even worse, outreach from Daniel, meaning customers we don't have to bother. On the other hand, too many false negatives gives the opposite effect, that there will be people we do not catch in less accurate systems. I also think that it is important when we talk about this sensitivity is to, exactly as Daniel touched upon, it's unrealistic that no matter how efficient solutions Mindway AI or other detection solutions providers provide, we will have a portion who will spin out of control and will need intervention and treatment after that. And obviously the more specific we can help both the later stages, phone calls from operator side or treatment providers, the better. and of course also much earlier, more individualized, ensure the right and not stigmatizing messages in comms related to what David was referring to. And the other bit is also the opportunity that we focus more on the individual customers, individual gambling behavior, trying to clarify the full picture, because that is kind of the foundation to be able to do both, to also potentially reach out to the customer earlier if that was of interest.
Yeah. And just quickly staying on this topic, Rasmus, so with the spotlight on AI, as you said, and particularly in the gambling industry, and the risks of algorithm misuse or, regulatory gray areas, how do you see the RG landscape evolving in the next, let's say, 5 years? And how can operators prioritize getting that balance right between innovation, but also the ethical responsibility attached to it?
Yeah, I think if we start with the latter, it is likely to expect, seen from an AI perspective, an AI provider perspective, that there will be levels of regulation on how AI solutions are working, how they are built in general, and that is also very important to us. So we every now and then go into the topic of explainable AI. The way I define explainable AI and how we work with this is that basically everybody who works with our solution on typically operator side, but everybody who interpret data from it, use it in their day-to-day work for decision-making support of what to do about what we have detected in terms of responsible gambling, at risk of problem gambling, should know how it is worked, should know how the mechanics is actually built, meaning that we do not have a situation where the outcome of this AI is some sort of black box outcome, and we don't want that. We don't want a black box approach. We want to provide a solution that is working under human supervision, but with utilizing of the newest technologies. So for the detection and monitoring purpose, that is very sensitive, but we also foresee opportunities in use of AI and maybe even larger language models elsewhere in the whole coverage of the full journey of monitoring, detection, and intervention support. What we provide.
Okay, thanks, Rasmus. So moving on, of course, we couldn't have this discussion today without talking about regulation and compliance. Yarden, I'll come to you on this one. So with the increasing focus on stricter regulations, and with particular reference to scrutiny of models, algorithms, and affordability checks, how do you see these measures impacting the balance between the customer experience and then the effective preventative mechanisms as well?
Well, I think we're expecting lots of challenges. Obviously, I think the first one is to make sure customers understand that we're honest with our intentions and not just ticking a box because the regulator said so. That's a big challenge for us. And I think the biggest balance we need to find and strike is between allowing customers to be in control of their own limits, time, spend limits, and also us imposing them. And when we do impose them, we need to make sure it's not overwhelming to them. So I think the best way that we'll do these things is by nudging customers and explaining and educating and making sure they're setting this on their own, and we don't have to do it for them. They set the limit where they believe is right. And in case we need to challenge it, fine, we'll challenge it and we'll have that discussion with the customer. But we want the customer to be in control as much as they want to be in control. I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah, and add into that as well. So what trends do you predict in regards to regulatory approaches, particularly in newly regulated markets, and how could operators adapt to those while maintaining that trust that you mentioned?
Well, I think it's no secret affordability is the big topic for 2025. That's the biggest trend I think that all operators, especially here in the UK, are looking at. And that will be a big challenge where I think we'll need to be very transparent with the customers about how we use their data, what are we going to do with it, how we're going to store it. And I think the way for us to be ahead of all of these is to learn and look at other territories and constantly learn at what others are doing, what other regulators are imposing, and try to be ahead of the curve as much as possible. So we're constantly learning, we're constantly reading and listening and joining webinars and trying to see where everyone's at.
Yeah, for sure. Well, affordability did come up as a topic, so I know we're going to touch on that.
No doubt.
And also, so forging, closer industry partnerships is always a talking point. It came up actually as a topic on our webinar last year as well as one of the top ones. Dave, we'll come to you on this. How do you foresee the collaborations, between regulators, operators, different organizations in the industry evolving to improve RG practices, particularly within regards to data sharing for more effective interventions?
I think that, especially in the UK, this is going to be a hot topic in 2025, that from all the political upheaval over the last few months and things like levies and RET and all stuff like that, I think a lot of collaborations now have got to prove their worth a lot more. There's actually got to be some value and some output from collaborations for operators to really see some value. I think that's a really good thing because it's going to raise standards. And I think that any collaboration has got to offer value not only to the operators, but to the industry as a whole. So I think that things like how we can actually interact with customers through collaborations is going to be really crucial in 2025. And it kind of links a lot what Rasmus is saying about AI and what Yadin has been saying about how to speak to the customers, that any collaborations which can aid that communication, that it becomes more of an interaction rather than an intervention, which is two very different things. I think that's actually not only going to help protect players if we're talking about RG, also we shouldn't be afraid to say that a lot of operators can see this as a real commercial asset. If you get your communications right with your customers and your customer care right, there's a real opportunity for some leading operators to kind of take a leap forward and use this to actually aid their commercial operations as well, and bring in the compliance departments with the marketing departments and with the C-suite and with the whole business, rather than being the compliance people in the corner who tell everyone off for doing the wrong things and make sure everything's doing right. I think there's a real opportunity for those compliance people and the huge compliance team that we have in operators now to actually really support the growth of the business and not just make sure boxes are being ticked.
Yeah, and to follow up on this, because you mentioned about having the different parties at the table, public awareness campaigns to better educate players about RG came up as a discussion point. What do you think, Dave, will be the role of education and awareness in RG efforts, in particular with crafting these more effective public awareness campaigns?
I think verbally, when we say what's going to be the difference between public awareness, it's not going to change much from the last 2 years. But what I think will be different in 2025 is there's got to be some more impact. It can't just be words. It's got to be action going forward. So public awareness campaigns have mainly almost started off from the point that gambling is inherently bad for people, and it's how to protect yourself, how there's harm. That is obviously, of course, a real issue. But I think the public awareness campaigns can actually start educating people about gambling more now. So safer gambling and responsible gambling for people who gamble and who are going to continue to gamble. And that's a very different tone to actually the messaging in the public awareness campaigns that perhaps what we see at the moment, which are very much about how to stop, how to prohibit gambling. So one of the things I predict is that actually the awareness campaigns are going to be focused more on the whole market rather than just a small part of the market. And I think that is actually crucial for a sustainable industry. And Rasmus mentioned the word before about stigma. I think if we can reduce stigma, and we're talking about gambling as something which is, this is how you can potentially enjoy gambling, get the most out of your gambling experience. If we can reduce stigma, we're actually going to find people and going to be able to identify people who need support and real support for problem gambling a lot easier, which will complement the AI models really well as well.
And if I can add, Dave, also potentially earlier, because due to the fact that we, as I mentioned, often clarify the full picture and want to clarify the full picture, not only monetary spend and related to, for instance, affordability, but do our utmost to clarify the full picture of the specific individual customers' individual gambling behavior. Then we also see changes in the behavior significantly earlier than when operators normally do reach out nowadays. So obviously that can be then combined with reaching out earlier in a more individual tone of voice related to the specific situation and specific game type or specific whatever in the customer profile in a much larger volume than currently, which is of course impossible if you have to do it personally. So that needs to be, of course, also automated.
I think that's really important, Rasmus. And actually, the education piece, it doesn't just stop at the actual players. The education piece has got to be for the people working in the industry as well. Would every customer service person in an operator be confident enough to discuss why certain slot games, what someone's playing and maybe not suiting their style of play, but would they be able to advise them what maybe slot games would be more suitable for them, so they get more enjoyment out of that game? They're more sustainable player and they're less likely to get in harm, because that's the key part of the education for me. It's people understanding gambling, where actually it's very easy to say to that player, no, you're not playing anymore because you have shown some signs of harm or affordability checks or something like that. But that player then just moves to somewhere else. Where actually, if we're educating them about gambling, whether they gamble with you or somebody else, we're looking after the whole industry. So I think that education, we often focus on education of players, but education of employees and staff working in the gambling industry to have those high-level conversations with customers and actually help them.
And also on leadership level, have the guts to reach out earlier with, let's say, short-term risk of losing revenue for the long-term gain of keeping the player around for longer is another one, in my view.
Yeah, and I think also gaining more customers, because when I speak to even just people around me, they're surprised that my role even exists. They're like, oh, really? You do this?
Yeah.
And I didn't know the industry does that. And suddenly they feel safer to gamble because they thought it's just, well, it's the Wild West. And clearly it's not anymore. So I think educating
we hear that also
everyone.
all the time.
But
sorry.
Dina, a question for you there, I suppose, is that because the industry has not felt confident enough to actually stand up and talk about some of the things they've done? And I would understand that fully, that who wants to put their head above the parapet. But I do think 2025 might see the industry start talking about some of the good things they do and some of the positive actions they do, where I feel previously there's been a nervousness to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are when I speak to people that are not gamblers, they're very impressed with what we do and how sophisticated the algorithms are and how much we know about a player and what we can do to protect them and what we offer to players to self-control. I think we definitely can do more.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a bit of a disconnect between all the efforts that are happening and what the general public understand. Like you said, Dave, not only the players that might be affected, but the ones who are actually having a positive experience as well. So just to move on to you, Dan, given the increasing emphasis on incorporating lived experience into RG strategies, what role do you see for individuals with lived experience in shaping future policies?
There's a lot of room to bring them to the table, I think, for more conversations. Lived experience folks provide something that most of us who work in this space don't have, which is the fact that they've gone through something pretty traumatic and they've made it out to the other side in a lot of cases, for the ones that you see speaking publicly. A lot of what we've done is bring lived experience folks in to help us design everything from the way that we approach speaking to folks on an initial intake call to screening calls. And it's really helped, right? Like, it really helps normalize the language, it really helps normalize the situation, and it really helps normalize the process, right? Which is really good. And I think lived experience folks will have, I think, a pretty significant role in helping understand what systems need to be in place, where and why, and then how to execute them better so that you can get to someone faster and you can solve problems faster for individuals who are suffering from gambling related harms. And I think you're going to start to see more voices come forward. I think like the environment is starting to become ripe for it in the States. It's gaining a little bit more momentum for folks who are now starting to speak up and explain what was going on and give enough background and context to the situation. But I think it's also like one of the things that I really focus on when I'm talking about lived experience, folks, is just to try to connect a couple of dots with what Dave was just saying here a moment ago about more representation for gamblers in general and the messaging, and talking about safer gambling, period, right? Like gamblers have mental health issues too, right? Like this is not a mystery. You know, a huge portion of the population who comes into play are already dealing with mental health related issues, right? So having these conversations early and often is normal, but it needs to become more normalized, right? And I think the more that we use lived experience individuals to normalize language, the better that bridge is going to be the gap in that bridge is going to be closed, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
I think that's quite an interesting point that you raise about, you know, the existing mental health issues that are there already, and kind of like the change in the language and how that can be helped.
No, I mean, it's reality, right? Like there's 5 people on this call right now. At any given time, one of us has probably dealt with something, and we've probably all dealt with something in our lifetimes, right? Like, why would we suspect that gamblers who come onto platforms aren't dealing with the same things, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, why is that missing from the conversation in a lot of arenas, right? Like, it only makes sense from where I come from, anyway.
I think sticking on the lived experience as well, Neve. I think that the lived experience, I think that can become a lot broader in a sense that lived experience. Why aren't we learning from the lived experience of people who gamble safely? And gambling through enjoyment and have had a lifetime value of gambling? That is a lived experience. And I think that if we're always using a negative lived experience, I think it's fair to say that to actually drive policy and the way forward, we're missing a huge group of people and a lot of information where we can actually balance it up. And I think that's a key thing, getting that balance between the lived experience who've suffered from gambling related harm and the lived experience for people who gamble for a whole lifetime and really enjoy it. What can we learn from them, and how can we put that into our systems to make sure that people new to gambling, right from the onset of when they walk into a casino, sign up to an online site, what can we learn from their experiences that we can maybe push people that way so they have a similar great experience rather than a negative one? So I feel like lived experiences, we shouldn't just think of lived experience as someone who's suffered really horrendous gambling related harm. Lived experiences, learning from people who've gambled at any point on that continuum.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because when you think about it and people don't understand, or they might not know what's normal for, you know, one person's gambling experience, and because maybe people are a little bit embarrassed to talk about it, they don't really share it as much. So I think bringing that to the table a little bit more can only be helpful to open the conversation up.
I know there's a lot more work going on with player panels and actually finding out about players and talking to players about what they don't like, what they found maybe could have pushed them to something what they didn't want to do. So I think that's a real positive, which was probably started, but I think in 2025 that's going to carry on a lot more and working with player panels.
Yeah, that would be good to see. And Yardena, back to you. So this was touched on already. Dan mentioned about, you know, the language being used and trying to personalize interactions in RG. How do you see that advancing? Because I know this is another big topic of focus for a lot of operators.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in data and surfacing it as much as possible to the players, same as a lot of other industries are doing. I think we need to empower them and to make the right choice based on their experience, based on their data. So I think we'll be seeing more less vague messages and more accurate messages. So we won't be seeing you've been playing more than last week. We'll be seeing more accurate as you've been playing X amount of hours more than last week. Is everything okay? And trying to nudge them towards the relevant tool and not just, here's a list of all of our tools, pick something that might work for you. So I expect that we'll see this. I think we'll see more player statements, activity statements. I think this is part of regulation in Australia. I think it might be coming in the next couple of years into the UK. And I think it's the right thing to do, because this way we give the control back to the player. We allow them an opportunity to be honest with themselves, even just in privacy. But at the end of the week, you receive your iPhone report, right? And you're the one looking at it and thinking, okay, I've spent too long on this app or on that app. I need to spend less time with my phone. And you make decisions based on that and bring yourself back to normal. So I think we'll see much more of that, and just surfacing accurate data.
Niamh, I think that fits in really nicely what we said before as well about actually a responsible gambling effort to actually increase the customer satisfaction. Now, customers love to hear that sort of thing. We're all at the start of January now where we've all had our Spotify, Strava. I got an email yesterday from the coffee shop, the Nero coffee shop, telling me how many coffees I've bought and what my favorite drink is. And I read it because I was interested in it. It's kind of something because it's all about me, and it's interesting where if a gambling operator can bring in responsible gambling to almost keep people entertained and keep them on the platform as well, there's commercial value to that as well as protecting the player. So I think that would be really exciting going forward. And we can all look at our profit and loss now and things like that, but the more detailed information you add in, and like you said, I think it'd be really exciting for a customer as well as good for player protection.
Yeah, it will be an opportunity to plant a seed without having that even interaction. It's just there for them to look at.
That's exactly when I say automated earlier, individualized interventions or communications. That's examples like this I'm referring to. I was just thinking that as you know, as everybody knows, the devil is in the detail, and when it comes to detail and data, then that is a chapter of itself and way too much to speak into here. However, what we see is that the opportunity of the use of AI is actually adding context for this. For instance, nightly play is well considered markers of harm potentially, whereas some systems less sophisticated will be able to say there's a nightly play, yes or no. AI-based solutions, for instance, from us, will be able to provide insights in that and context to it. Is the nightly play with steady deposit patterns and around weekends, then that's one situation. Another significantly other scenario is if it is nightly play spinning into early hours on weekdays and with more erratic deposit patterns. So obviously, all those detailed combinations can also tap into such activity reporting, short-term or longer-term, depending on the setting.
Yeah, and Rasmus, I'll stay with you on this next question because a lot of people submitted predictions on stronger RG tools, to mitigate the risks and protect customers. But besides from detection and monitoring solutions, how do you see the advancement of other RG tools?
Yeah, we have, as you might have noticed, the ones of you who know us, insanely many ideas on what to do about it all, because obviously we have built for some years now this approach to detection and monitoring, but we definitely also be part of what to do about it, meaning enhancing the let's say software support for operators in terms of doing interventions, communications, and that we have a lot of different projects and work going on there also with a couple of you at this webinar panel. So I foresee a significant development there, but also I think it's important to be aware of the fact that different target groups can be reached by different channels. I'm a bloke in my 50s, early 50s though, so I can be reached by email, less by TikTok. My son, who is 19, that's another story. So obviously we need to also have a situation where we have some sort of Swiss knife approach, that we need to have functionality in place where we can reach the different target groups. And that's a whole new chapter of this. I foresee that, but also I foresee that AI-based communication, decision making to a wider extent, as mentioned before, in covering the whole journey here and the whole area is a prediction for 2025 onwards from my side.
Okay, thanks, Rasmus. Jardina, back to you. You mentioned about affordability earlier. It's been a big topic, and of course it came up. In particular, in the UK, how do you see these measures evolving in the near future? What challenges do you see, in them effectively protecting the customers, again, without disrupting the experience that they have?
Yeah, I think, we have a few challenges with this. I think beyond the customer experience is a bit challenging. I think privacy concerns coming from the players is a big thing. People don't want to share their information with their bookies, which is understood. We can see it when we ask for statements. People are not happy to give them. Clearly, they're not happy for us to run these checks in the background. So I think we'll need to be very transparent and explain what are these checks. Will they impact their credit checks? Answer all of these concerns in advance and explain when these checks are run. Because I think the media blew this up a little bit and people are worried that as soon as they register, that's it. We know everything about their bank statements. But in reality, it will affect only a certain number of players when they reach a certain threshold. But the media will scare them. So I think we need to educate customers beforehand, before this blows up. I think also the concern from the players over intervention, over player autonomy, right? So again, allowing customers to set those limits, try to stop them before they hit that threshold, try to slow them down, make sure they're comfortable with what they spend will be a big thing. And I think we'll need to balance between automation and human oversight. So we still need those agents in place to have a look. The tool might have given one number, but we still need to be there and look if the customer challenges this or feels uncomfortable with this. We need to look at this with human eyes and have a conversation, get to another conclusion maybe. So I think it will be a combination of all of these things that we'll have to do as operators to make sure it goes smoothly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Jardina. So if just a reminder to all attendees, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. We should be able to fit some in if anyone has any at this point. But we're coming towards the end of the session. And to wrap things up, I suppose, to go around to each panelist, just if you could prioritize one prediction in RG for 2025, what would it be and why? Who wants to go first?
Sure. I think learned language models is going to become hyper-focused on how we communicate with individual players, right? And if I go down a layer, I think financial impact and affordability is going to be very close in contendance.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. Dave?
It's a little bit different to what I've been speaking about, I think, but links to collaboration. I think the whole event scene in gambling is going to change a little bit. I think it's huge at the moment, and I know ICE is coming up, as you can see on social media, but I just think that there's going to be a lot of space for events which give a lot of information, give a lot of content. Like Jardina mentioned before, she wants to find out what's going on in the industry, and I think events might become a little bit smaller, a little bit more niche, focused on different areas of the business. And actually, I think there's a real opportunity in that space to give the industry what it needs, and that's information and a chance to collaborate in person. Because no matter where we are as an industry, I think the best parts of what I enjoy from the industry most and what I get most from it is when you're meeting people face to face and when you're seeing people. And I think events are still going to have a huge place in that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an industry of a lot of extroverts and people.
Yeah, but I agree with Dave. I think collaboration is going to be big, and I think even the UKGC are pushing, from conversations we've had, they're clearly pushing us, big operators, to collaborate and catch up and try to find the best solutions, best practices, and come with it to them rather than them dictating this to us. So I think we'll see more and more on different topics, as we've done on previous things like Game Protect and things like that. So that will be bigger, in my opinion.
Great.
Yeah, I guess you're right about that, Jardina. Also, as I see it, it could be a prediction trend that why even compete on compliance and safety systems and the approaches there? Why not just join unitely as an industry, because it's for everybody's in the industry greater good. I will add to what you said, Dan, related to what I mentioned about channels. I think that's let's say a dimension on what you said, and to what you said, Dave. You're absolutely right. That's also why we are about more niche events. That's also why we are a proud co-sponsor of the new initiative of Leaders in Compliance, who will have an inaugural event in Frankfurt, Germany in April, for the ones of you who would be of interest of that. Yeah, so, and of course, enhancing AI-based detection, monitoring, and decision-making support for the agents is an ever ongoing topic, I guess. And let's see how the high-speed train will then reach the station, or maybe just continue, who knows.
So yeah, a lot to think about for the year ahead. I think we'll leave it there. So a big thank you to Ardina, Dan, Dave, and Rasmus. Brilliant discussion. Thank you all for joining us today on the webinar. So I hope you found the insights shared today useful. And a reminder that the webinar is been recorded or has been recorded. So you'll get a link to the recording that will be shared with all registrants. So thanks again for your time today. We hope to see you soon at ICE. The Mindway team will be in the Sustainable Gambling Zone via booth SG14. I'm sure some of our panelists will be there as well. And if you want to meet up with them, we can facilitate an intro as well. So thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.